best. Said, are you ready for the best? Let's go. Yeah, I said I got this, I'm in it. I'm hella filthy, so I got this, I'm winning. I'm not a quitter, so I'm not fucking quitting. Just try to stop me and you'll drop dead missing. I'm on my way to the top now, listen. I ain't never gonna stop, too driven. I ain't never getting lost, got vision. I'ma make this shit hot, ignition. Yeah, y'all give me facts, not fiction. Then you know I fucking listen, cause I'm on a fucking mission. Man, you got to be driven, cause this world is unforgiving. You're the only one that's winning, or the only one that's quitting. So get up and stay committed, don't be asking for permission. Hit the gas after ignition and start acting like you're winning. Make your own damn decisions, don't let others make you victims. Have a thought and have a vision, don't get caught up in the millions. Yeah, I'ma make this shit hot. Oh, I'ma light this shit up. Yeah, I'ma make this shit hot. Oh, I'ma light this shit up. Light this shit up. Let's go. Yeah, I said I got this, I'm on it. Give me 5 years and I got what I wanted. I'ma go ahead and finish all that I started. I'ma go ahead and get it all uncharted. I can make this place go off like a rocket. I can give a fuck if you hate it or you love it. I don't do this shit cause I think that you want it. I just do this shit cause I know that I want it. I could give a fuck if I die today. If I'ma go out, it's my fucking way. At least I'll go out with some pride to my name. With the fight, not a play, that's my fucking way, ho. Y'all can sit back and think you heard the best of me. I can guarantee that you haven't seen the rest of me. I can guarantee that this shit's gonna be my destiny. And I will never sleep till I make it, then I'll rest in peace. Yeah, I'ma make this shit hot. Oh, I'ma light this shit up. Yeah, I'ma make this shit hot. Oh, I'ma light this shit up. With the best, you fucking with the facts. Yeah. I don't even know what else to say. I'll let that 808 right out though. Yeah.
Yo. How y'all doing? I needed a second, so needed a second yesterday. I wasn't feeling it. I was feeling a little frustrated with the audience not growing as fast as I wanted to. Feeling a little frustrated with my dad's situation and a little frustrated with my wife's situation. So I was not on. I didn't feel it. So instead, I watched some Smallville, some Superman and Lois. It was good. Not the way I wanted it to go, but it was still good. I'm interested in getting DC's All In. I hope it's good. I'm not really interested in DC's All Absolute or whatever they're calling it right now. It some of the stuff I'm seeing doesn't interest me, but the All In, the mainline initiative, seems kind of cool. Anyway, let's get into the Techno Puritans. Let's check out their thing on fapping. I promised this video a while back, and I didn't deliver when I could have because I got distracted by other things. So we're doing it today. This should be fun. I do have 2 other side videos. If it ends up being boring, I seriously doubt it will be boring. But just in case, I do have 2 backups, including a Metatron video. So, but let's get into it. Let's have some fun. Back to the Techno Puritan twins. There we go.
Why are all of these cultures like breaking apart? It's because they have equated premarital sexual intercourse as exactly the same moral negative weight as masturbation. And that's really effing stupid. It made a lot of sense before porn existed, because if you look at the lines, and we'll get to in the Bible about this, they don't talk about masturbation.
There's really no time before porn existed. Some of the first drawings of human beings were pornographic. So there's really there's no such thing as a time before porn existed. As soon as art existed, porn existed.
They talk about prostitutes. Seeing a prostitute actually is just as bad or worse than premarital sex. You know, from a disease risk perspective, from a pregnancy risk perspective, there is a reason that historically you needed to warn against all of this stuff, right? But in a modern context, when you put restrictions on porn, you increase the rate of sex crimes.
I'm just saying, what works on planet Galgamech isn't necessarily going to work for the rest of us here on Earth. You see? That's the problem we're having here.
For every 10% of increase in internet access in the US, there is a corresponding regional decrease of 7.3% of rape cases.
What are you doing?
Internet is hardcore.
Gross.
Why you think the net was born? Hardcore.
UCLA researchers found that sex criminals on average consume less porn than the average person, and started consuming it.
So you hear that, Trent and not Matt Whitman, what's his name? Matt Fred. You're wrong. The statistics do not support you. The actual statistics, not your bullshit apologetic statistics that twist facts. The actual statistics, scientific statistics, don't support you. That doesn't mean you're morally wrong, but it means that your bullshitting is morally wrong. And you should stop saying it. And you should just say, well, we don't allow it because of our religious views, not because of science, because science doesn't back you up.
It at a later age than the average non-sex criminal was in the Czech Republic, where porn was illegal, then legalized. This decriminalization of pornography caused in 1 year rapes to decline by 37% and child sexual abuse by about 50%.
There went my
Similar
monetization
results
for this
were
video.
seen when the porn laws were loosened in Denmark, Japan, China, and Hong Kong.
Wow.
Anyone who is pro-pornography restrictions is functionally also pro-child rape. The Bible says it's best, by their fruits you will know them. How do you know the correct interpretation? It works. If it leads to mass child rape and cover-ups, it's not the correct interpretation. The Bible tells us that. Easy peasy. Right, guys?
I'm just trying to say that if we don't change, then we might lose everyone to atheism.
What exactly do you suggest we change?
Well, for one, no sex with boys.
The holy document of law states that a priest cannot get married, so where are we to get our sex?
Would you like to know more?
Hello, Simone. Today we are going to have a fantastic episode. We are going to go deep into research around sexuality, into statistics around sexuality, into biblical theology. We're going to go into a bunch of lines from the Bible. We're going to go into the philosophy of sexuality. And we are going to be coming up with a model for the way we will teach our kids to engage with their sexuality, because I think one of the biggest backdoors, when a person comes to me in a traditional religion and when they say, when they hear me say, oh, you need to evolve this tradition or you are going to get creamed by the urban monoculture, like, well, what do you mean by that? One of the number one things I am going to elevate is the way that their religion relates to sexuality. Sexual rules that evolved in a time period before basically free internet pornography was everywhere, before contraception, when STDs were running rampant, when you had to worry about getting random people pregnant like at a high level, is going to create a very different optimal rule system than a modern system. And people might be like, well, why not just be stricter? And it's like, well, because that causes really bad externalities within a modern culture, but also leaves often a back door in a child's brain where you have not built a framework for how a part of the world works that the urban...
I don't really care about the not addressing certain type of societal risk to a younger person. I don't care about that. But more importantly is what he said originally, which is that it doesn't, in theory, being stricter works, but in practicality, when you actually try to use it. And this is something Augustine says, I think it's Augustine, in The City of God. It's something that different theologians and philosophers have said, that when you get too strict, and this is shown also in China, when you get too strict, people start breaking the laws on purpose. Non-criminals start breaking the people with appetites. Start breaking the laws on purpose. So you're creating more crime, not less, by going too strict. You have to have some allowance for certain levels of, you want to call it depravity. Yes, there's some stuff you have to say absolutely no to, and everybody thinks it's reasonable. But within the general culture, there are certain restrictions that are not necessary. And in fact, they actually increase crime and increase negative affect.
Monoculture can basically install
I wish you'd stop saying monoculture, but it's fine.
self-replicating mimetic framework that can eventually eat their entire mind. And
Monoculture and univocalarity are two words that I desperately think need to go out of usage, even though only 2 people I know use them.
that's what all the gender ideology stuff is. But first, I want to talk about how these old rules around sexuality keep going wonky in a modern context. And why? As we're going to be arguing here, I would argue that there should be, and I will teach my kids, no cultural restrictions at all around masturbation for pleasure if it is to any image or video that...
Mind you, he says his kids, if he's talking to a stranger or an academic equal, he's speaking to his wife. So this means their kids. Just FYI, just some context. I know they look like twins. They're not related.
Doesn't use a real human, i.e. anything that's AI generated or drawn or anything like that. And we'll get to why, if you make this set of restrictions, it actually solves most of the problems the old restrictions solve, while also protecting against a bunch of the new problems. So, problem number 1 that you see is the Mormon swinger phenomenon. Have you been following these scandals, Simone?
Of course I have. In short, a reality TV show, I think on Hulu, right, came out detailing Moms of TikTok, a TikTok group of Mormon mothers who also just happened to turn out to be swingers.
The point is that this has become common within part of Mormon culture. And specifically what they do is it's not considered cheating if the husband or wife is in the room watching you, which is actually really weird to me because that would cause a really, like, there was a Sneeko drama where like he was in an open relationship and then he talked about watching his girlfriend sleep with another guy. And people were like, that's being cucked. And he's like, no, I'm in an open relationship. And they go, yeah, like open relationships are normal. Watching is not. And the reason that other guys would say this, and it appears that just Nico either didn't have this part of his arousal pathway or had this part of his arousal pathway inverted, is a normal male for obvious evolutionary reasons is going to get a very strong disgust reaction from watching a partner of his sleeping with another male. That would have been very evolutionarily disadvantageous. Now, for women, it's going to be different because women might have existed in a harem environment or something like that. But for men, this is one of the loudest disgust motivators a normal man can feel. And so I would have to guess that these men might also have had this sort of silenced or muted in them as an arousal pathway. If I was going to guess why this would be uniquely common among Mormons to have the cucking arousal pathway silenced, it might be a holdover from their sister wife ancestors, where the wives who are okay with watching other wives having sex or who got into that might have passed that down to some of their male offspring as well, leading to higher rates of arousal from cuckoldry within the Mormon community. Do you understand the logic behind that, Simone, or do I need to explain it differently?
No.
Except I don't think they were in the same room as the other ones were having sex. They'd probably be in different rooms or even be in different households or different, whatever the structure is. I'm not saying that it has to be that way, but if it's in any kind of religious context, they probably wouldn't be in the same room at the same time.
You didn't
That's
face it,
just
you
a
didn't
guess.
understand.
Well, I'm just thinking about it. I mean, in most of the sister wife arrangements I'm aware of, it's the sex part is not at all shared or communal.
They tell you.
Okay.
Yeah. No, they obviously wouldn't tell you.
But
like,
I agree with Simone here. Simone is correct. That everything that I've heard and seen, not that I've delved deep on this one, I was, for those that don't know, polyamorous back when I wasn't atheistic, actually when I was lapsed. So I was in 3 different poly relationships, 2 triads, 1 quad. But even then, it's not, it's really just loose dating within a confined group of friends. I know that seems weird because everybody thinks about the sex, but it really wasn't about the sex. And I would assume here that if you have a religious context, saying how you can have sex, not only who you can have sex with, but saying how you can have sex, if you're taking it serious enough, I don't think you're having the kinky fun sex that he's talking about. I think Simone is correct. It's more about relationship and pawn bearing, and yeah, the husband might be going from bed to bed, night to night, or whatever their arrangement is, but they're not all together. So
I don't even know
they're not
what
having orgies, in other words.
you're on about. Like, you think that the sister wives who are trying to show how, and keep in mind, the Mormons who still do this are the most religious of the most religious Mormons. Like, you think that they are really going to tell you, like, the things that are hot about the relationship for them? Come on. Like, you clue in here, Simone. But anyway, I want to be clear here, this is not a Mormon-specific problem. Okay, on the Discord, we did a Catholic episode recently, and the first thing everyone was jumping on was like, "Oh, all those Catholic girls, acting like the butt stuff and the oral isn't going to count when they get to heaven as premarital sexual intercourse."
But again, that wasn't a Catholic thing.
I don't know. But do you think if I told Tom I had an incendiary device down my knickers, she'd have a look? Oh, some of them are right. I'm willing to admit it.
Because it's just common among Catholic girls. Like, I have slept with girls in this category myself. There is a common thing where it's like, well, oral doesn't really count. And I really like the joke that one of them told us, like, you get to heaven, and God's like, I'm sorry, premarital sex, and then the girl's like, wait, play that video back again. Stop, zoom in. See, it was anal. And then God's like, 2 heavens for you. That there's like these loopholes.
What in God's name are you wearing?
That is a really stupid observation, because sodomy is a bigger sin, especially at the time period that he's talking about, than infidelity. So, sorry, I'm trying to fix something. So, the girl who thinks that is an idiot. And it wasn't Catholic girls who were talking that. It was the purity ring people, which a lot of people conflated with the Christian girls, not necessarily Catholic girls. But either way, it was a stupid trend that really didn't have a foundation in reality, that may or may have not been real, but it was the purity ring people who were doing that, not the Catholics. Although there were probably some Catholics who were the purity ring people.
I'm putting together my costume for the Halloween dance. So you're going as a stripper? No, I'm a Catholic schoolgirl.
Thank God. Whatever you do, don't slag off the Pope. We're outnumbered.
And again, it's not just the Amish grape epidemic is really bad in the Amish community. They're really strict rules. Or, in the modern ultra-Orthodox Jewish community, people are breaking the Shoma Nega. I'm pronouncing it, I'm butchering it, I can't speak other languages, which are their rules against like hand-holding and touching. Apparently it's really common, but they're supposed to be very, very strictly held. And it's caused by, like, what leads to all of these rules being so feckless? Or other Mormon stuff like soaking, where they just leave themselves inside the girl. Or what's the other one where they like bounce on the bed?
No, that is soaking, where technically, because the male and female partner are not in leading the mechanical effort of thrusting for PIV sex, and instead there is just placement with a very awkward friend theoretically jumping on the bed to assist, that would work out.
Hey,
I still think
high degrees of cuckolding in the Mormon community.
Right. That just seems so apocryphal to me. It seems like a joke that somebody made up, and it's really caught on because it's just such a funny concept.
No, I think a lot of this stuff, like the oral and stuff like that.
Again, a lot of that is just jokes and 4chan bullshit, but it doesn't mean that people aren't stupid and don't believe the joke or the prank is real, including people who are in the communities that are being made fun of. But that's just 'cause people are idiots.
That this is actually very common.
No, the oral I know is super like common, where it's like, well, yeah, we don't have sex, but we, oral doesn't count. That I know for a fact.
Anal don't count, so.
Fine.
Anal does count, oral does count. That is literally the definition of sodomy, which is a grave sin in the Catholic Church and in most Christian interpretations. So people are just idiots and don't know the definition of words.
Well, I think anal. I think anal's different. I think anal's different, but I know that oral is a workaround that is definitely.
We're going to talk about why this happens. Why are all of these cultures like breaking apart here?
I think this is going to sound unfair. I think she knows more about sex than he does. I'm not talking about promiscuity here. I'm just talking about like the functions of being male and female in the world. I think she understands this better than he does.
Here, it's because they have equated premarital sexual intercourse for pleasure as exactly the same moral negative weight as masturbation. And that's really effing stupid. It made a lot of sense before porn existed, because if you look at the lines, and we'll get to in the Bible about this, they don't talk about masturbation. They talk about...
I don't think it makes sense, period. I submit to the rules because I'm Catholic and I got to submit to the rules. But I don't think it makes sense biologically. I don't think it makes sense philosophically. I don't think it makes sense, period. But yeah, like I said, as a Catholic, you just simply submit to the rule.
Prostitutes.
You don't have to agree with it. You don't have to understand
actually is just as bad or worse than premarital sex.
Which actually, what he's saying right there is not Augustine's argument. Augustine's argument is that you need to have a red light district. You need to have the prostitutes to keep the almost the same argument that he's making for masturbation. It's the same argument that Augustine and a few other people make for prostitution. Also, I think, if I'm not mistaken, Confucius also makes the same argument. But you got to have an outlet for the people who can't get laid otherwise. Otherwise, you're going to have problems. Whether you want to call it crime or any of the other darker things, or you want to just call it social issues and no.
From a disease risk perspective, from a pregnancy risk perspective, from a, there is a reason that historically you needed to warn against all of this stuff, right? But in a modern context, if I'm like, in absolute terms, is a kid who is not allowed to masturbate much more likely to engage in certain types of premarital sex or engage in, when they're married, certain types of sexual exploration that otherwise they would just feel no desire to do? Absolutely. It is a huge moral failing of the way the rule set is working now. And then there's the secondary problem, which is outright bans on masturbation have a lot of problems. Specifically, if you tell somebody, don't think about X, it causes people to think about X. This has been studied like extremely well. So there is the book on this, if you want to read it, that's pretty good, called Overcoming Unwanted Intrusive Thoughts, a CBT-based guide to getting over frightening, obsessive, or disturbing things. There is also the white bear experiments conducted.
Every time I see CBT, all I see and think is cock ball torture. That's it. I can't think of any other words that those initials can mean. There's a TikToker, an older guy, a guy my age, except that he looks older than me, but he's the same age as me. And all he was talking about was, and he was just making the pun, and he never said, cockball torture. He was all talking about whatever CBT is supposed to mean normally, but I couldn't figure out what it's supposed to mean normally. That's all. I don't know. I've hung around perverts for way too long in my life. I have no idea what it actually means, what the initials are when it's not being used for kink.
By Daniel Weger in the 1980s.
By the way, I'm not into that, so please don't. But I don't know what other initials that could be.
And these studies asked participants to avoid thinking about a white bear for 5 minutes, and they were very, very bad at it. Specifically, when
well, that's an old trick though. That's from even Grant Cardone uses that trick in Cells, which is don't think of an elephant or think of an elephant. It's once you say it, it's there. Yeah.
You ask somebody to not think about something, you are causing them to engage in a form of suppression or psychological suppression, which requires cognitive resources and makes them bad at basically...
It causes cognitive dissonance, actually.
Thinking about everything else. And the problem is that some people will be like, oh,
or all you can think then about is what you're trying not to think about, which is why silent meditation and void meditation, which these two are against, specifically he's against, is so important, because learning how to silence your mind is much more important than trying not to think about something. Just trying not to think about something will force you to think about it. Cognitive behavioral therapy. Yes, Thomas, you are correct. If my show ever goes big, you're going to have to stick along, because you're like the perfect co-host. Anytime I drop the ball, you and there's one other guy who comes in here. I can't remember what the other guy's name is, but whenever you guys are here and I drop the ball on something, I can't remember a word. You guys just chime in perfectly.
Recent research has shown that this doesn't work around things you're afraid of. Okay, yeah, it doesn't have the same effect if you're trying to get rid of like PTSD stuff or things you're afraid of, but it does still hold with sexual things. So here I'm going to read a few other studies. The rebound effect of thought suppression I'm quoting from a study, and this study is called God, I Can't Stop Thinking About Sex, the rebound effect in unsuccessful suppression of sexual thoughts among religious adolescents.
I love when people who do peer-reviewed research do good titles. It's just a thing of beauty.
So the rebound effect of thought suppression refers to attempts to suppress thoughts that result in an increase in those thoughts. So in the thoughts that were trying to be suppressed. The aim of this 3-study research was to investigate the suppression of thoughts and its possible importance to cognitive model of predicted compulsive sexual behavior, CSB, among Israeli, Jewish, religious, and secular adolescents. The analysis indicates that religious adolescents are higher in CSB than secular ones, and that religious suppression and CSB mediate the link between religiosity and well-being. So they actually lower the well-being of these students and lower some of the positive effects of religiosity that these students would otherwise be experiencing. And then a 2019 study reported in the Journal of Sex Research found the attempts to suppress sexual thoughts can result in an increase in those thoughts. This is called the rebound effect. So here, I'm going to quote from our book, The Pragmatist's Guide to Sexuality, because we also go into this phenomenon a bit. Some claim that all arousal patterns not tied to penis and vagina sex between a married couple arise when a society loses God. There is an element of truth to this. When surveyed, religious individuals claim to consume porn at lower rates than non-religious individuals, though claimed porn consumption by religious individuals has been increasing rapidly since 1995. This is as far as that element of truth extends, as all other data indicates that these individuals are lying. In fact, when Harvard-educated Microsoft economist Benjamin Edelman investigated porn site subscriptions and Google searches for porn on a regional basis in 2009, he found that the more religious regions consume porn more than the less religious regions, with the highest rates of all being in Utah. Specifically, Edelman found that subscriptions to porn-based sites and online searches for sexual content were higher in states that had enacted laws to defend marriage, and in which statements like, quote, I never doubt the existence of God, end quote, quote, even today miracles are performed by the power of God, end quote, quote, I have old-fashioned values about family and marriage, end quote, and quote, AIDS might be God's punishment for immoral sexual behavior, end quote.
The way he's reading this is terrible. I'm going to jump ahead just a little bit. There we go.
Soft porn thing that existed for people who don't know.
I remember.
And this general was Andrew L. Whitehead during a broadcast of Good Friday Mass from the Vatican. And this was at 2 a.m. The Girls Gone Wild ad accidentally aired, and they received record sales.
Accidentally.
Yes, they received record sales for the Girls Gone Wild. That was an old like soft porn thing that existed for people who don't know.
I remember Girls Gone. Yeah, I guess for the younger people.
From a side post titled, quote,
I cannot think of these people as being older people. To me, they look like in their late 20s, early 30s. I can't imagine them being actually old. Who knows?
Quote, a conservative religious environment strongly increases the chance of adolescent porn viewing, study finds, end quote. Quote, without controlling for individual religious identity, however.
Oh, crap. He's still doing the quote, end quote stuff. Come on. Get away from that. Stop doing that. Just talk like a human.
So a 66.53% interest. That is insanely higher. Like you are, and here I just note from the Bible, from your fruits you will know them. So a fair share of conservative Protestants, especially among youth who were not conservative Protestant themselves. So a 66.53% interest. That is insanely higher. Like you are, and here I just note from the Bible, from your fruits you will know them. Is this a good practice? So if I'm making a judgment biblically, I need to say, does it lead to the intended outcome? No, it leads to the opposite outcome.
Which is my point.
It is not a good.
Which is the point I've made in Matt Frad's chat. I've made it in his comment section. I've made it with other theologians and apologists. I get it. They don't like me for saying it, but it's the truth. What they're advocating for makes everything worse. Sexual education and allowing people who do not submit to your religion to express themselves sexually as they wish within reason and limitation is not only the right thing to do, but it actually leads to the goals that we have as religious people. While on the flip side, if you try to repress all of this stuff, more people practice the thing that you're trying to repress. The moment you tell people not to smoke, they're going to smoke. The moment you tell people not to think of an elephant, they're going to think of an elephant. It's just the way that it works. So if people, on the other hand, are voluntarily coming into your religion and voluntarily choosing to take your rules upon themselves, they're more likely to follow it. This works for heroin addiction. This works for porn addiction. it doesn't matter what it is you're trying to do. If someone comes voluntarily to the situation and picks up the challenge, if someone's scared of an elevator and they step into the elevator voluntarily without you pushing them, they're more likely to get on the elevator again. This is a very simple psychological principle, and we use it in salesmanship all the time. It's how a lot of us sell cars. It's a very simple trick. If they come to it voluntarily, they will do it. Are you guys hearing me? Because I just had my system did a quick flash reboot. Let me know if there's sound in the chat, because that was weird. Zach, yes. This is the war on drugs. This is when Matt Fradd and other Christians are trying to repress things like a free porn from Pornhub. Like they think that's going to solve the problem. No, you're just going to make everybody get VPNs. You're going to make VPNs very popular and make VPN companies make a lot of money. That's all you're doing. You're not stopping people from watching porn. You're definitely not stopping masturbation. So this is really stupid.
Practice. But it gets even worse than that.
Thank you, Thomas.
You are probably hurting kids more than you think by making these requests. It's specifically here, and if people are like, okay, well, from a religious system, then how do you handle this? You've got to really worry when you're building your religious system against a phenomenon called scrupulousity. Scrupulousity is the pathological guilt and anxiety about moral issues. Although it can affect non-religious people, it usually just affects religious people. So it's like when you become obsessive compulsive about following a deontological religion.
And scrupulosity is a problem that Martin Luther suffered from. So I'm not being funny. I know this is going to sound like a big insult. It's not. Protestantism stems from a mental illness. That's not a joke. The origin of Protestantism, I'm not talking about the proto-Protestants. I'm not talking about any of the stuff that led up to the Reformation. I'm talking about the actual Reformation itself. Stems from someone having OCD, and they can't get over the fact that they might sin again or that they might not be saved. That's literally what Protestantism, what the Reformation stems from, is from someone suffering with mental illness and with abuse issues from his father. That's real. That's not me being ironic. That's not me being funny. That's real history.
Just ethical framework, and it leads to extremely negative life outcomes. So how do you avoid this? How do you avoid this focus on pornography and stuff like that? Well, what you do is elevate the types of thinking you want to elevate rather than suppress the type of thinking you don't want.
And that's what I just mentioned with the elevator. You have to make people take it on voluntarily. If they take on the challenge voluntarily, they will follow the rules. If the rules are forced upon them, then they will break the rules. Even if they're good rules, even if the rules that if they had chosen them, they would follow on their own. But by making it no longer a choice, you automatically trigger in their minds, if they're have a tendency toward rebellion or toward distrust of authority, you immediately trigger the active rebellion, the active resistance to the thing, and you fetishize it, and you're making it a taboo, and you're making it a fetishization, which then can become an obsession. And now we got the compulsion going. So you're actually inducing mental illness and emotional responses to stimuli. You're literally causing a mental or emotional addiction. So you're causing the compulsion to occur by making these rules something that you can't be opt out of, and by making them obligatory. That you're actually causing the problem you think you're trying to solve. It's just that it's no longer going to be public. Now it's going to be private. So now more people are going to do it because they're doing it underground, because now it's like, oh, okay, now it's a secret.
And we'll get to how you can do that around sexuality at the end of this particular, I guess I'll call these lectures, whatever they are. But Simone, do you want to give your thoughts before I go further?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you want to discuss this later, but I think that also we're not trying to say shove your kids into erotic material and tell them to have at it, and that there are no problems if they start consuming it in excess. Consumption of anything in excess is a sign of a problem, and it's something I think we would discuss with our kids. But within the broader context of excess of anything, where
I like how she says our kids, and he says my kids or my future kids, or he talks as if he talks more robotic, she talks more human. It's a good complimentary. Like this is why I wanted my wife to be part of these shows. There's only like a handful of episodes that she's part of. My wife is an academic, and she's also very compassionate. So she's very mean. I think my wife is the meanest person I know, but her voice and her words are very sweet, and I think it has a very good. Because I speak harshly and I speak crassly, but I'm actually super sweet, and she's super mean, but she speaks very sweet, and I think that's a good combination. I think that would have been fun for us to play off each other, and I think that's what's happening here. I don't know their home personalities. That's not what I'm talking about. But I'm saying like, but him being more robotic and her being more human, it comes across very interesting, even if in real life they're both super robotic or whatever. It's a good mix.
you find that you are.
You might be surprised, but excess porn consumption is incredibly rare outside of religious communities. Secular porn addiction seems to be specifically related to moral bans on pornography.
Yeah, and that's a sign of a larger problem that appears to need to be solved. But I would just say,
Matt Frad, are you listening? Did you hear that? Someone clipped that with my reaction because my channel needs to be promoted. Someone clip that and show that to Matt Frad and have him react.
that
And no, Matt, you cannot blame the devil. The devil's not making people whack off. It's not making chicks, flick it. It's not happening. It's not the devil. It's just human sexuality. And if you repress human sexuality, it'll find alternative ways of expressing itself.
Our kids about consuming too much. I would warn our kids about anything where you start to change your daily habits and to prioritize consumption of something.
So I would say that I would categorize porn consumption in the same category of immoral action as video games.
Oh, no, I was thinking exactly the same. Video games, food, even exercise. Basically anything where other things in your life are suffering because you are so obsessed with getting in more.
I wouldn't put exercise in the place of sin. I don't think that works. I think this is more golden mean, golden balance. Aristotle's, you don't want to go too far one way or too far the other way. You want to be right in the center. This is more that. This is more Aristotelian ethics and less morality or religious morality.
More of an action, and it could be anything. Then you have to
There's
worry
more
about it. So we don't even have to
philosophical
have that
ethics and
conversation around sexuality. We have that conversation around addiction, period, or habit forming, period.
Morality, religious morality.
And I will note here, I love when we have takes that are, because I know that this take is going to piss off a lot of our listeners, but it's just so based by the data. Like the data on this particular subject is so overwhelming, and they're like, well, you're not based. And I'm like, well, we're not going along with the urban monoculture's framing on this stuff either, as you'll see. Our hidden conclusion is quite offensive to them.
I want him to stop saying urban monoculture. First off, the majority of the world that's Catholic is not all within cities. So a lot of Catholics are like tribal. So that doesn't even work. Modern doesn't even work because there's different levels of development. Modern is present. I mean, the presentist, I don't know. This doesn't, his definition of religion is stuck in a Protestant definition. It's the same problem that I had with John Barton, which John Barton was amazing. I really like the book, but there's like two major problems that I have with him, maybe three if we push it. But one of the two major problems I have with him is that he's always focused on a Protestant perspective for his definitions and terminology, which is really limiting for someone who's reading him if you're not coming from a Protestant perspective or an atheistic perspective. If you're coming from a Catholic or Buddhist or Taoist perspective, a lot of the stuff that he says just isn't true from the perspective you're coming from.
Being based, it doesn't mean agreeing with everything your group thinks. It means, saying what is true even when it might lose us subscribers, as this episode probably will. But that's how we keep from getting audience captured. You just got to keep plowing through.
Keep pissing people off. That's the secret.
When the evidence isn't in their favor.
That's what I'm doing, but yet somehow I don't have.
As we'll go over, it just very clearly isn't.
I need a larger audience. I'm pissing people off. I don't know what I got to do. I even had a dumbass Trump coin. Where is my Trump coin? Where is my Trump coin? Shit. I had a Trump coin here to piss everyone off, and I think I lost it. Where did I put it? Okay, while they're talking, I'm going to look for my Trump coin. I'll be right back.
It's important that we not only do what's best for our kids, but give other people the tools to do what's best for their kids in terms of the way that they teach them about this stuff.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm going to be quoting from The Pragmatist Guide to Sexuality again. Masturbation may contribute to a decline in many social ills. UCLA researchers found that sex criminals, on average, consume less porn than the average person, and started consuming it at a later age than the average non-sex criminal. Had today's sex criminals been able to explore their sexuality through their imagination earlier, perhaps they would not have felt compelled to commit their sex crimes later. So I should note here, when you put restrictions on porn, you increase the rate of sex crimes. In fact, the data bears this out. For every 10% of increase in internet access in the U.S., there is a corresponding regional decrease of 7.3% of rape cases, suggesting that the internet and its facilitation of masturbation may provide an outlet for sexual energy that might otherwise cause serious damage. Across nations, more permissive attitudes towards pornography are correlated with lower rates of rape and less violence against women. A great
Progressives and leftists, be mad.
Czech Republic, where porn was illegal under
I
communism,
bought a
then
fake
legalized when the
coin
party fell. This
made of
decriminalization of pornography
grass?
caused in 1 year grapes to decline by 37%.
I paid $50 for this.
Sexual abuse
It's only worth
by
25,
about
maybe less.
50%. Similar results were seen when the porn laws were loosened in
Now,
Denmark,
subscribe.
Japan, China, and Hong Kong.
Wow.
Anyone who is pro-pornography restrictions is functionally also pro-child.
Hold on, we're going to listen to that again.
Out. Then the masturbation may contribute to a decline in many social ills. UCLA researchers.
Okay, we're going to go back and hear that again because what he was saying was important and I was being silly. So let's go back.
What's best for their kids in terms of the way that they teach them about this stuff.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm going to be quoting from The Pragmatist Guide to Sexuality again. Masturbation may contribute to a decline in many social ills. UCLA researchers found that sex criminals, on average, consume less porn than the average person, and started consuming it at a later age than the average non-sex criminal. Had today's sex criminals been able to explore their sexuality through their imagination earlier, perhaps they would not have felt compelled to commit their sex crimes later. So I should note here, when you put restrictions on porn, you increase the rate of sex crimes. In fact, the data bears this out. For every 10% of increase in internet access in the U.S., there is a corresponding regional decrease of 7.3% of rape cases, suggesting that the internet and its facilitation of masturbation may provide an outlet for sexual energy that might otherwise cause serious damage. Across nations, more permissive attitudes towards pornography are correlated with lower rates of rape and less violence against women. A great study of this can be seen within the Czech Republic, where porn was illegal under communism, then legalized when the party fell. This decriminalization of pornography caused, in 1 year, rapes to decline by 37% and child sexual abuse by about 50%.
So listen to those statistics. Assuming that they're going to good sources and these two are speaking in good faith. What they just said there is that when you increase repression of artistic sexual expression, this is pornography, art, whatever, the whatever sexual expression is when it's not pornography, when you decrease these things, you actually have an increase in sex crimes across the board. And not just the things you just made illegal as being expressed. No, hard sex crimes, like the hard R stuff, the hard C stuff, like all of that stuff increases. The worst types of sex crimes increase when you make pornography illegal, when you repress masturbation, when you subjugate sexual expression and mitigate sexual exploration. Sexual abuse goes up, and this is actually demonstrable because when communist countries take over, they're actually more sexually repressive, and then when they let go of the brakes and let it off, the terrible sex acts stop, and normal sexual activity increases. So normal sexual expression increases when masturbation and pornography or sexual expression are allowed, while sexual deviancy increases. The extreme sexual deviancy and sexual crimes increase when normal sexual expression is repressed and masturbation is not allowed, and sexual art is suppressed or illegalized. Hear that again. More banning of porn increases sexual crimes, violent sexual crime, and abuse. More porn, less crime. Period. Statistically proven, tested out, not just theory, proven by facts, data, and time.
Similar results were seen when the porn laws were loosened in Denmark, Japan, China, and Hong Kong.
Wow.
Anyone who is pro pornography restrictions is functionally also pro child rape. Period. We have.
And there it is. And that's my problem with Matt Fradd and Trent Horn in a nutshell. They let their dogma and their non-essential religious beliefs dictate, for apologetic reasons, their actual beliefs, their actual thought process, their actual cognitive beliefs are dictated by their apologetics. Their opinion is dictating their reason, not the other way around. Their reason's not guiding their opinion. Their opinion is guiding their reason. And so they will say false shit and get people hurt because in the long term, their advice is bad and wrong. There are prostitutes in the Bible. There's a whole book in the Bible that's erotica. Sex on its own is not evil. Sexual expression is not evil. But when you act like it is, this is the consequence. I did not think I was going to be agreeing with them with this video. I was thinking I was going to be contradicting them. But so far, he's been giving good facts that I'm already pre-exposed to. So,
multiple times, when you implement those laws, the result is children getting raped.
I forgot just how striking the data was. It's insane that people are still, that there's any ambiguity here. It just seems so
no
obvious.
ambiguity
Yeah.
at all.
yeah, but this is people's dogmas, dogma might be the wrong word. This is people's dogmatic thinking on their religious interpretation, influencing their understanding of theology and psychology and facts. They're letting their dogmatic thinking color in their reasoning, which they should be using their reasoning to help defend the dogmas that are actual dogma, the essentials of the faith, and not this other stuff that has nothing to do with it. When you concentrate on sexual repression, you're actually causing more crime and more problems than you're solving.
Oh, I mean, regardless, if a person wants to, at an individual level, say they believe in restricting access for them or their kids.
But again, if someone takes on these restrictions voluntarily, then there is no act of rebellion. There is no active resistance inside the person's mind. There's no cognitive dissonance happening. But they have to take it on voluntarily. They have to choose. If you don't allow them the free will to choose, then they will automatically rebel. They don't even have to want to. They can want not to rebel, but they will automatically do so. Their human nature will kick in. And I don't mean their sin nature. I mean their actual human nature. Their animal nature will kick in the moment you try to force them to behave in a way that's not voluntary.
To pornography, I'm like, okay, I can get behind that. But when somebody begins to push laws around this at the state level, they are now, in my mind, around the same category of morality as a child trafficker. Because they just, or somebody who facilitates laws that facilitate that. Because they just show that they do not care about the actual results of what they're doing, and they do not care about the actual children who are going to suffer because of the choices that they are making for essentially virtue signals. And we've seen this within some conservative events in the UK, and it's like the one thing where I just want to like, oh my God, or even that when Project 2025 suggested pornography bans in the United States, I just wanted to slap the person who wrote that. I was like,
Yeah. So when you have an increase in sexual crime and sex deviancy in the next 3 to 5 years in states like Texas and Oklahoma and Alabama, it's literally a direct result of them banning Pornhub. So the little victory they think they got is going to be undone by the amount of crime and violence that will increase, from physical abuse and sexual abuse to physical altercations to violence between men for competing against limited resources, here meaning the women. All of this will increase because the guys who can't get girls are going to start competing with the guys who can. They're going to start, being abusive to the partners that they have. It just increases the amount of problems in the world. There are some men who cannot talk to women. Yeah, they're physically attracted to women, but they can't communicate. They can't do anything. And there are other guys who can. And you are increasing the danger. You're increasing the violent tendency in the man who desperately wants to survive, because there's a biological need for procreation in a man. There's a drive for survival, for the procreation of the genes. And you are now not giving them a way to express it. And if they can't express it in a peaceful way, they will express it in a violent way. And this has nothing to do with them being a man or a male. This happens with women. This happens with animals. This is an animalistic reaction.
Like, do you understand the consequences of the laws that you are suggesting be put into place? But they don't care. They don't care. These virtue signalers do not care. Everything for them is this bizarre virtue spiral.
Well, yeah. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily put it as not caring. I would put it as not thinking about it and not orienting around truth or evidence-based decisions, because humans aren't.
Where they're basing it off of moral decisions based on their understanding of their religiosity. They're not basing it on the actual facts on the ground. They're not looking at the consequences. They're looking at, well, this is consistent with my moral way of thinking. And they're putting consistency over practicality, over actual results, over utility.
Now, there's a portion of us of ourselves, I would say our prefrontal cortex, which is all about evidence-based decisions. But that thing came last, and that thing comes online fully last. And most of us barely get out of like our limbic system. So can you blame us? We have the potential, but it's not the default. So I don't blame people for virtue spiraling and focusing on social conformity.
I do. You say you don't blame people, but the result, you've always said things happening to kids is your line.
Yeah, no, that's my line. Well, and also I see the only thing that makes us human as our prefrontal cortex. So at the same time, I don't blame them, but I also dehumanize them because I think that they're reverting to that which is less human. But I still understand. I guess I should reword it to, I understand why they do that. They're failing.
But see, he's also trying to hold her to a line of consistency that is impossible to hold on to. Because the moment you're empathizing with the other person, you have to understand where they're coming from. I empathize with Matt Fradd. I get it. Sex is supposed to be between a man and a woman. And the Bible says, you're not supposed to do that or you're going to be vomited out of the land. So how do we keep pure? Okay. Now, the Bible has allowances for prostitution, has allowances for any kind of sexual deviancy you can think of within limitations. Polyamory is in the Bible. There's a whole bunch of different sexual expressions in the Bible. And it's because it's supposed to be documenting the history of a people, even though it's really documenting the history of people's understanding of the God they're serving. But it's a different conversation. On to the point, which is you have to have these release valves to keep the sexual tension and pressure, at safe levels, if you will, at manageable levels. And when you do this puritanical nonsense that comes out of the Puritans, that comes out of the real Puritans, not these guys, that comes out of Protestantism, that comes out of things like, is it Bonaventure? that comes out of all these kind of different threads. It comes out of my homeboy, John Christensen. It's a purity spiral. It's the guys who came up to Jesus and said, "Well, what about this guy? What about this guy's not doing it right? This guy's not doing it right." It's like, no, they're not against us. They're with us. Leave them alone. Yeah, I get it. The sexual ethic is based on this one understanding and reading of Onenson. We're going to say you can't masturbate. Fine. But you can't enforce the law. And you can't enforce the law in people who are not Christians, are not Jews. And that is what the Bible keeps saying. The Bible says over and over and over again, if they're not of us, then they're not one of us, and therefore they are not subjugated to our laws. So who are the laws of Christianity for? They're for fellow Christians. They're not for non-Christians. The Bible is very explicit about this. Who are the laws of the Jews for? They're for Jewish people. They're not for non-Jews. Now, Jewish people living in the land, Jewish people in the community of Jews have to follow these rules as well. In Christianity, those who are a member of the church have to follow the rules to be members of the church. If they are not, then they're not in the church. That's why Protestantism messed everything up. Because by making the church this invisible thing, by making membership irrevocable, you now are forcing people to follow rules that they do not want to submit to, which causes deviancy, which causes rebellion, which causes tons and tons of problems. So, unfortunately for me, and unfortunate for Matt Frad, I'm agreeing right now almost 100% with, I don't forget this guy's name. I know this, I figured out her name, Simone. I haven't figured out this guy's name yet. But yeah, I'm agreeing with him.
To rise above, but they are doing what the default is. So,
well, they're acting like animals, and
Yes.
I believe people who act like animals should be treated like animals.
Well,
and thought
I
of as
disagree with
animals
that.
because they are not rising above their animalistic instincts
Yeah.
to think through and look through what are the results of the stuff that they're proposing. And I think people often are surprised, like, why are we so viscerally against porn bans? And that is why, because of the consequence.
well, which is kind of ironic because what people think of when they think about indulging in porn is people succumbing to their animalistic instincts. And indeed, that is a part of it. But it's more like acknowledging that there presently is not a convenient way around these animalistic instincts, at least for some people of certain hormonal profiles. And of course, there are things you can do that can suppress that, but they have side effects that can be dangerous. So if we have to live with these instincts, the better thing to do is to grab control of them and exercise them in ways that are minimally damaging, which per our policy around erotic material, no human actors. And in moderation, it is 100% the most optimal way to deal with these urges. It makes perfect
without
sense.
any of the negative externalities.
Exactly,
Because when you remove
yeah.
human actors, then you remove the any trafficking problems. You remove any problems with prostitution.
Yeah.
You remove any problems with impressed labor. You remove any problems you remove pretty much all of the moral qualms.
Yeah. So when I model the argument of someone who's opposing us, what they're trying to say is, oh, you say we're supposed to rise above with evidence-based thought, but we're trying to rise above our basest human instincts by simply abstaining from all of it altogether.
And I
But what we're
think
saying is you
you're
can't do
failing.
that.
Yeah, it doesn't work.
Yeah, it clearly doesn't work. And when you try to do that, it backfires. So what we need to do is acknowledge where our limits are, prepare for our limits, build around the limits, and then rise above in more meaningful ways until we can fully extinguish this. And we've in other podcasts even talked about how when it gets to be possible to safely suppress human sexual instincts, we will 100% do so. And already all of our kids have even been created in the complete absence of actual sexual intercourse. I mean, we have sex, but our kids are not created using sex because we feel that there are better ways to do that.
No, there are ways to already mute sexual impulses. You can
Well, no,
mute
there are. It's just that the side effects, like for example, me starving myself as a teen 100% worked because it just took.
I'm not sure what she's saying there. Is she saying that they didn't have sex, that they used artificial means of insemination for her? So are they not having sex? As a husband and wife, that's pretty sad. You want to be having sex with your wife. So if that's the reason why they're not in the same room together, that's a little fucked up. That's a little sad. But all right. Again, I don't know how much of that is sensationalism, and I don't know how much of that is her just wording something wrong. Like maybe she's talking about the group Techno Puritans altogether. But here it seems like she's saying that they didn't actually have sex; they had the baby through artificial means.
Took my entire hormonal system offline, and then I had the hormonal profile of a prepubescent child, essentially. So there are ways to do it. I just think the side effects are damaging, and also like you can go on, you can delay, you can go on gender affirming care and delay
But
onset
Simone,
of
why are
puberty.
you ignoring naltrexone? It obviously works and has almost no side effects.
But would naltrexone
Look, I
stop
am not
arousal?
for the government mandating naltrexone, but what I am saying is technology already exists.
But naltrexone that deals with addiction pathways, not with
No, it
arousal.
can vary. If I was to masturbate while on naltrexone for like 3 days in a row, I would stop wanting to masturbate.
Would you stop having interest in?
Yes, I'd
Like-
stop having interest in women. Yes, that's the way naltrexone works. It works on your opioid pathways and removes.
Arousal is just 100% on that system, you're saying?
100% on that system.
Oh, okay. Okay, fair point then.
So we already have the tools for doing this, but do I think it's ethical to mandate everyone take something like this or even pressure our kids to take it? No, I would say it's an option if they think it's the best way to control a certain impulse. But no, I'm very against mandating any of this stuff. All right, now back to what I'm reading here.
Okay.
Other studies reinforce these results, such as one in aggression and violent behavior that found a weak inverse correlation between porn consumption and violent behavior towards women, specifically.
Okay, anyone who's watching right now, whether you're incognito or you're actually active, what do you guys think? Should we keep going? Should we not keep going? Should we go 30 more minutes? Should we go an hour? What do you guys want to do? We can pretty much stop here. We pretty much covered everything we needed to cover. I wouldn't mind going another 30 minutes, but we could go for the full hour. Anyone in the chat, let me know what you guys want to do. I'm going to hit play and let me know.
Rape and sexual assault. The study's findings suggest that the more porn a man consumes, the less likely he is to commit these violent acts against women. Despite what we had assumed, masturbation and porn consumption do not lead people to think less of women. People who watch pornography hold views of women as more equal to men than those who do not watch pornography. Consumers of porn are no less likely to describe themselves as feminists and actually express more egalitarian ideas about both women in positions of power and working outside the home, according to results of a study published in the Journal of Sex Research. We did, however, find a study showing that men who were low on the trait of agreeableness did increase already existing sexist attitudes when exposed to pornography. So basically, you need to get incredibly in the weeds to show when you have these individuals like Louise Perry, who I love, but I think she has some stuff like porn causes men to think poorly of women or like do these derogatory sex acts towards women, and it's like that is factually untrue. And I will never get over these women today, because I hear this in conservative spaces. They're like, men choke women during sex because of porn, and then women learn to like it because of that. And I'm like, we did not make you all turn 50 Shades of Grey into a best-selling book. That stuff is coming from women. As a guy who has slept around a lot, that stuff is coming from women.
I don't think saying slept around a lot when you're talking to your wife is a smart move. Even if you're in a poly relationship or something like that, not a smart move.
Okay? That's not coming from the male side of the sexuality spectrum, and you can see.
Thank you, Thomas. I think I'm just going to go to the 10-minute mark, and then we'll do the outro. And by the 1:15 mark, we'll go ahead and be out. So we'll go about 5 to 10 more minutes from here.
This in our data. It is the women who aren't consuming as much of the traditional pornography who are more desiring of the violent category of sexuality. You are just denying their experiences and likely haven't felt them, because it appears, and people can watch our other videos on it, that form of female sexuality might be triggered by a high body count, but I don't want to get into that. If you want to get into that, you can go to our video on, what's a good one on this? I believe it's like Raider versus Homesteader sexuality. I'll try to quickly and briefly explain how the theory works here. So
Interesting.
Essentially, we argue that in a historic context, women could have found themselves in multiple scenarios for which a different arousal profile would have been optimal. Specifically, they could have found themselves in a monogamous cultural group, they could have found themselves in a polygynous cultural group, or they could have found themselves as essentially a slave taken during a raid or a war or something like that. We argue that women evolved a changing arousal pattern based on specific environmental condition.
Now, this is just their theories. This isn't the actual sexual theory that's out there. But I used to be really interested in sexual research, not sexual research as in erotica, as in like actual sexual data. When I was in college, before I declared my major, one of the things I was thinking about studying was sexuality, and I think this is a fairly good theory on it. The reason why I didn't pursue it is because the writers that I knew, like Tristan Taormino and a few others, were mostly doing it as a subset of erotica, which I was not interested in erotica at all. I actually wanted to do the sexual study of the sexual data because I found that highly interesting about how sexual response actually works. Anyway, with responses and stimuli and how people actually behave versus how people report. So people will report a behavior, but what they do doesn't always match their report. And it was in that difference that I was interested in this type of research. So what he's saying might be consistent with what people are reporting, what they're feeling. But when you actually hook them up to electrodes and see how they actually physically respond, what their physical response doesn't always match their emotional response, which is incredibly interesting. And the way that people act on stimuli, it's not always how people react to the stimuli in there. So in the mind, they have one opinion, but the way they actually behave in the situation is different. It's interesting stuff to me.
And that we can actually see this in the data and know what those conditions are. Specifically, when a woman hasn't slept with a lot of people, she will have a release of oxytocin during intercourse, which causes a
And this is what I'm talking about right now with the differences.
Or you could almost argue bonding with the person she is sleeping with, i.e. she is very likely to fall in love with that person.
But if they're polyamorous, they do not.
Just because of the act of sex, and that sex modulates and makes it much faster that she forms a love bond with an individual, but that this no longer happens the more partners she has. And we can see this from a lowering of oxytocin during sex when women have had lots of different partners. And this is because
this is exactly what I was just talking about. And this to me is highly interesting about how that works.
in an evolutionary context that would have only happened in a polygynous society. In a monogamous society, it is very advantageous for a woman to fall in love with.
So the whole theory about pair bonding only works because of social conditioning. But the question then becomes, will the social conditioning happen first, or are both strains aberrations of the same mutation, and therefore the people who... It's kind of like an egg versus the chicken question. Did the people who had the gene or had the chemical profile to be monogamous create a monogamous society, or did a pre-existing monogamous society create people who had a genetic and hormonal profile for monogamy versus polygamy, those who had a more... I don't know what you want to say here, a more promiscuous sense to themselves. Did they create more polytheistic societies, or did polytheistic societies create more sexually liberal people? And then the question becomes, well, if most societies in modern culture are monogamous, does that mean that monogamy evolutionarily is a better precept for survival? So hence the societies that are monogamous won out in the evolutionary gamble that is evolution, that is society. So monogamy wins out and is the better system, not because of some moral hierarchy, as we would say as Christians, but actually because in practicality, in actual evolutionary terms, it is the better way forward for survival. So monogamy leads to survival of the human species. Therefore, that becomes the dominant moral and societal standard, because polygamy doesn't lead to better results. Evolutionary theory, I know, and when you put evolutionary theory into a societal scale or civilization scale, it becomes much more complicated because now there's so many variables that it's really hard to pare down. But it's interesting.
Build an emotional
Okay,
bond.
and that's time. Let's go to the... All right. I would like to thank Thomas. I would like to thank Zach. I'd like to thank anyone else who joined in today. Anyone who's watching incognito mode. Yes, I know I wasn't on yesterday. Yes, I was watching TV. I just needed a break, man. I was feeling bad about other stuff. But things are looking good. I need to do some financial stuff, but things are looking okay. There will be an update, a life update soon. My dad's fund, I still have to figure out how I'm going to do that. And there's some other stuff going on. But all in all, it's been a good night. Remember, this stuff here that we're talking about is actually super important. Just because something in theory makes logical sense doesn't mean that it works in practicality. You have to look at the data and you have to look at the results. When I was weighing out what faith I was going to join, I didn't just look at the religion that made the most sense. I was looking at the results of the people who practice that religion and what lifestyle I wanted to mirror and who I wanted to be. That was a big factor in my choosing which faith to follow. For me, Christianity, Catholicism ended up being the answer. That doesn't mean that most Christians or most Catholics live the lifestyle that I'm looking for. It just means that the lifestyle being promoted that seemed reachable there's a lot of factors, put it that way. But yes, consistency, for consistency's sake, can lead to corruption. So, all that being said, remember, God loves you. God forgives you. Forgive everyone, even yourself, and be kind to your enemy. I love you. I love you all. I'm grateful for you all watching tonight. Have a good one. See you all tomorrow. Here comes the music.
Okay, you fucking with the facts. So are you ready for the best? Said, are you ready for the best? Let's go. Yeah, I said I got this, I'm in it. I'm hella filthy, so I got this, I'm winning. I'm not a quitter, so I'm not fucking quitting. Just try to stop me and you'll drop dead missing. I'm on my way to the top now, listen. I ain't never gonna stop, too driven. I ain't never getting lost, got vision. I'ma make this shit hot, ignition. Yeah, y'all give me facts, not fiction. Then you know I fucking listen, cause I'm on a fucking mission. Man, you got to be driven, cause this world is unforgiving. You're the only one that's winning, or the only one that's quitting. So get up and stay committed, don't be asking for permission. Hit the gas after ignition and start acting like you're winning. Make your own damn decisions, don't let others make you victims. Have a thought and have a vision, don't get caught up in the millions. Yeah, I'ma make this shit hot. Oh, I'ma light the shit up. Yeah, I'ma make this shit hot. Oh, I'ma light this shit up.